The European Union has added 3 Russian nationals and 3 companies involved in the transfer of gas turbines to Crimea. These sanctions are in addition to the European Union embargoes on Russia after the Crimean crisis. The turbines were originally sold by Siemens for use in Russian Federation. The subsequent transfer of these turbines to Crimea was in breach of the contractual provisions. The companies placed under new sanctions are the contracting party, which purchased gas turbines. The EU has not recognized the illegal annexation of Crimea and Sevastopol by the Russian Federation. As part of its non-recognition policy, it has prohibited the supply of key equipment for infrastructure projects in Crimea and Sevastopol in important sectors, including gas turbines in the energy sector. That's the latest. The European Union extending sanctions list against Russia. This in relation to the Siemens turbine supply to Crimea by adding 3 more people and 3 companies. This is the latest news that's coming in at this point. Reports say that this is much on the expected lines. These sanctions that EU has imposed over Siemens Crimea turbines. These individuals, 2 of them are Russian government officials and a senior figure with one of the companies involved. They will be subject to an asset freeze, also a travel ban. This is what the EU has said in a statement. Those targeted also include Russia's vice energy minister. The EU also said that setting up an independent power supply for Crimea supports its separation from Ukraine and that gas turbines are a substantial element in the development of new power plants. Just last month, remember, Siemens had said it was scaling back its Russian operations after finding out that 4 turbines had been illegally modified and moved to Crimea. Let me get in WION's London Bureau Chief Mandy Clark for more on this. Mandy, these sanctions that the EU has now imposed, they're much on the expected lines, isn't it? But was it expected that 3 top Russian officials will face the heat? Mandy, if you can hear me.
Sorry, just repeat the question. You just cut out right at the end.
Right. Are these EU sanctions on expected lines?
It is really, because the EU always was very critical of Russia annexing Crimea, and EU is also part of NATO, and the Ukraine is part of NATO. So when Russia, in the EU's eyes, illegally went into the Ukraine and took that part of Crimea, they put a lot of sanctions on Russia. The fact that they have now diverted these German turbines, bring it to Crimea, they see that as the first step in creating separate power supply to Crimea. And it just goes on with the EU never recognizing the annexation of it and doing everything possible to stop Russia from creating a more separate Crimea from the rest of the Ukraine.
Also, Mandy, after these sanctions, what do you see as a possible fallout of these? Because 3 top Russian, 2 of them are government officials on whom these sanctions have been imposed.
Well, the relations with the EU and Russia has been probably at one of its worst periods. It's important to separate the European Union from NATO, but most of the member states of the European Union are part of the NATO alliance. And of course, Russia is not part of that military alliance. There's a lot of suspicion on both sides. So NATO really suspects that Russia is going for a power grab, trying to grab more territory. They have beefed up forces in the Balkans, which is Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, that used to be part of Russia. And because of this deep suspicion on both sides, the relationships really hasn't ever been worse. So it's likely that relationship will stay in a deep thaw until they feel that Russia is not trying to reach into NATO territory, essentially, and other European territory, and take back what was former Soviet territory. There is also issues around the Black Sea, so there's lots of issues at play, and both sides are in a power struggle. I don't think the relationship's going to improve anytime soon.
All right. And Mandy, going into the specifics of what these EU sanctions entailed, and I'm quoting, I'm reading out the EU statement. It talks about out of these 3 individuals, 2 are Russian government officials and a third a senior figure with one of the companies involved. And these sanctions really say that they cannot even travel outside the country apart from some of the other, They are subject to an asset freeze, I beg your pardon, and also a travel ban. Any other details that you can share with us as far as the companies are concerned and these individuals who've been sanctioned?
Well, what we know about the companies, there are the companies involved that did these modifications to the Siemens plant. Apparently, the Siemens turbines were, quote unquote, illegally modified. So one of the companies was a power generating plant. That's the bulk of what we know, but it's very serious sanctions. A travel ban for some of the senior Russian diplomats and politicians is quite telling on how serious the European Union takes what they've done. They want to hurt them as hard as they can because they really don't have any trust with Russia, and there's not a lot of love lost between both sides. So it's the severity of the sanctions really speaks to how serious they take it, and they want Russia to know that they're angry.
Absolutely. Mandy, although there hasn't been any reaction yet from Russia, even earlier on there are media reports asking Russian officials for a reaction in view of these sanctions that were much expected, but Russia, has refused to comment on it, and not surprisingly so.
Yeah, so, Russia has a very different view on Crimea. They've always felt that it was Russian territory, and so their narrative to what was happened in Crimea is very different from the NATO native. So they will likely feel that they're being unjustifiably punished for purchasing a turbine. So it'll be interesting to hear what Russia comes back with, but certainly it won't be warm words, I can almost bet.
All right, Mandy, thanks so much for joining us.